Thanks, Inbar, for this session with us. We'll be talking about both leadership and LPM topics. But just before we start, I just have a few animation to share. Transformation is launched, and what now? Okay, so a quick introduction maybe for the three of us. So my name is Eric Touvier. I'm Agile coach and RTE in Sopra Steria, and I will be the one talking about the LPM. So next.
Okay, Arnaud, so I am consultant, managing consultant, mostly into transformation, safe transformation, part of it, and also coach from Lille. So
and I'm Inbar, I'm from Israel, and I'm the Chief Product Officer of SAFE, and I'm a SAFE Fellow in Methodologist.
Okay, great. I think we will start with maybe the leadership topic, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Maybe your first question for you, Inbar. So we may know, part of us may know, that Lean Agile leadership is the base of the whole SAFE value and principle. Everything is built on that, and you can see in the map below. As you said in your keynote, that's really important. So my first question would be, according to you, who should embrace that leadership in the company?
Who is a lean agile leader? So I think if you're looking at it from a who should embody lean agile leadership perspective, I would say almost everybody. It's not just a few people somewhere at the top of the company who are the leaders. I think everybody's a leader. If you're looking at the concept that are behind being a lean agile leader, which is leading by example. Well, who should lead by example? Everyone. Who should be constantly a continuous learner? Everyone. It's true. I think the reason we called it out is not because it's only for a few people, it's because it gets ignored. So somebody showed me this once. You walk into an office of a developers. What do you see on the table?
Oh, mostly gun toys.
Sure.
I guess. Coffee.
If you see books, what do they look like?
Large books that are barely open.
Yeah?
Yeah. C++, Java, stuff like that.
If you walk into a leader's office, you see a shelf full of books, and it looks like none of them have been read.
Yeah.
So it's we kind of take it for granted that developers will learn all the time. For leaders, you went through a leadership training and you already know how to be a leader. I think we put an effort on it because people take it for granted. But it's everybody. Everybody should lead by example. Everybody should be an insatiable learner. Everybody should be exhibiting a mindset of it can be different, learning mindset. So I think it's true for everyone. I think when you do an agile transformation, different people a lot of the time have to focus on different parts of it. Like if you're focusing on leading the change, well, there are probably a few people in the company who are leading the change more than others. But if you look at Kotter's 8 principles for leadership, for leading change, one of them is that you have to kind of get everybody aboard on the change. But everybody's leading the change. Yes, some people are doing maybe more parts of it, but everybody's part of leading the change. So it's shared. It's a shared responsibility across the company. The fact that people are just saying, if you manage people, you should be a lean agile leader. But if I'm a developer, I don't. Well, no, you're leading in a different way, but you also should exhibit the concepts of lean agile leadership. So I think it's a lot wider than people think.
And based on your experience, how easy or difficult is it to make those people, team people, understand that they can be a leader of that change?
I think it depends on the company. And again, leadership is bottom up, but it's also top down. If the outlook of the company, the way that people are projected at is, we are the smart people at the top, we drive change and you work, it's very hard for people to take responsibility for change. But if the attitude of the company is different, it's we're all part of this change. How do we harness this for all of us? And it's really a collaboration of how do we do it together? Then it's very easy to harness people for change. So it depends on how you approach them. If you come and tell them, we're doing safe, what's safe? You shouldn't care. Show up at the class and we'll tell you everything and then go do it. I'm not part of leading the change. But if we're coming together, we talk about the problems that we have at the company and why we need to change our ways and why what we've done in the past isn't good enough for us. And then we show them we show them the principles of Agile. We say, this is why we're going this way. Then people feel like they've been part of the decision and they'll be part of the change. So it's always a matter of how, not exactly a matter of what. So the same thing could have been done differently to create more collaboration around the ownership of change.
So what I heard is that you have people who have some positions where they should exemplify that leadership. So that's part of the job, and everyone should have some leadership. But how? What are you doing, and how do you help those people who have that position without the leadership? What are you doing with them?
So again, I think one of the differences we had with SAFE, what was happening before it, is before that the training was only for the teams. We come and we say, well, you have to start with some level of leadership. You don't start by just throwing people under the train and hoping that they'll be successful. You have to get leaders engaged and driving the transformation. So you start by training leaders, you start by coaching leaders so that people have the capacity to actually do the change. And in my experience, we've built Leading Safe as a training for leaders for a reason. Actually, for anybody who knows Leading Safe, it doesn't have a lot of leadership in it, but it has a lot of principles in it. So if you understand the principles and you actually understand why we're doing what we're doing, then you have the ability to actually lead the change. Because now when somebody comes to you and say, well, we're doing a retrospective. Why are we doing a retrospective? Well, you understand the why. You said we should limit, we're now doing limiting WIP on our Kanban board. Why? Well, you can explain the why. And I think for me, the difference that SAFE brought aboard is we're not going to ignore leaders and push them to the side and say we're just going to train teams. We're going to bring everybody together and we're going to start with the leaders and teach them the why, because we think that there's a lot of importance to bringing in coaches and partners and people to help you. But at the end of the day, the people who have to lead the company are the leaders in that company. And if they don't understand the why, they brought somebody else to transform the company for them, they've not changed and they leave, inevitably it always slides back. So it has to start with training the leader and training them in the principles of why Agile and Lean works. So for me, that's where it starts.
Do you think anyone can change and go to that mindset? I would just say, for an example, I'm pretty sure you already encountered some people, you know that difference between, for example, fixed mindset and growth mindset.
Absolutely.
We can see the difference in those kind of people, and especially with leaders or people who should have that lead position. So my question, yes, do you think everyone can change and go to that mindset? And in other case, what are we doing with them?
So nobody wants to say what I'm going to say right now, but the answer is no. You have a company that has a culture. When you're hiring people, you're hiring them for this culture. So if you're changing the culture of your company, the chances that 100% of the people in your current company fit the new culture is very low. So there will be people who don't fit the new cultures you're trying to create. Nobody likes to talk about it because people like to say, well, like me to say, yes, everybody can be in this new culture. But it's not true. It's just not true. Some people, it doesn't fit with what they want to do and how they want to work. And as sad as it may be, some people might have to find a different position, or you see some people leaving who cannot accommodate the new way of working. And I think it's a reality. if have you read Our Iceberg is Melting by Cotter?
No,
The book?
not this one.
It's a really, really cool book. It's about penguins who discover that their iceberg is melting. And one of them discovers it, and now he's trying to convince all the others that they have to move icebergs. They've always lived on this iceberg, but they have to move an iceberg. And one of the of course it's a metaphor, so he doesn't have to be he's not very shy about that. One of the penguins' name is No. That's the name of the penguin. You can imagine what he plays in that book, but when Cotter talks about what you have to do with people who are against any transformation and any change, he says that you have to understand that sometimes there will be a point where you might have to move them somewhere else. They might have to see more of a, right now we're transforming this part, maybe they have to move somewhere else so we can finish this. Maybe after they see it successful, maybe it will come, maybe it won't. But we have to realize that that's true. The problem with that is that having just said that, people now will jump to the conclusion, oh, we have somebody we have a problem with, let's just get rid of them. But a lot of the time those no-nos don't even realize that they're like that. They think that they're actually trying to help the company. So one company that I worked with, we had all the leadership team read that book, and there was one person who was behaving that way, and one day he showed up, I had nothing to do with it, but the team did that. He showed up in his office one day, and on his desk was a big penguin that said no on him. And he realized how he was behaving at that point, and he changed his behavior. But that's not the 100% of the cases.
Maybe a bit harsh.
It was a little bit harsh, but they still did it.
Yeah. I think everyone may have their opinion on that point. So I have the same question, but more for teams. I think we can, as we said, because of the lead by example, so we want more from actual managers and any kind of levels of management. We want them to have that leadership. As you said, it's we would like to have everyone in the team also to act as a leader, but as there's so many other people and various people and experts, and it may be more difficult to have that leadership, I guess. Maybe that's discussion.
I think that you expect, of course, different levels from different people, but I don't think it's necessarily a level thing. I know many people at lower levels of organization who are leading by example better than some of their leaders.
Yeah.
So of course it depends on specific people, but I still think it's very important. I teach martial arts. I think I'm trying to lead by example as I'm teaching, but I'm expecting the people in my group to also lead by example, because there's a new person coming into the dojo and they're seeing them, and the way that they're behaving, they're now seeing this as the acceptable behavior. So if you have a new person on the team, yes, he looks to his manager, but he also looks to his peers and say, Lotfi's out on Sunday and Lotfi's out on Monday, and I didn't see Lotfi in the office any day this week, so maybe I shouldn't come to the office. Because yes, your manager can show by example if the rest of the team is doing differently. So I think I do expect people to also do the same thing, and I think they do it more often than not. Of course, it's slightly different level and slightly different things, but I think you see the way that people respect their code and the way they write code and the way they do code reviews. That's also leading by example. It's also showing people the way to do things and the way we're doing things. And I think there's a lot to learn from that, just as much as any other type of leadership.
So you could say that what I understand is the subject is not that how to make everyone a leader, but how to make everyone understand that leading is not about position and management, but it's more about
it's exhibiting the behaviors. How to get everybody to exhibit the behavior of a leader, not about actually being a leader. Although again, a lot of people I've seen. One of the first places that I've done safe in, we chose a Scrum Master. She was the first Scrum Master of that group. We were just starting, and a week later, her boss resigned, so she had to take over his position. And of course, she had no time to be Scrum Master. And somebody else just took the position. This was somebody on the team. He was a developer. Honestly, I'll be honest, because I talked to a lot of people. Before he Nobody saw him as he's the next team lead or he's the next. But he stepped up. He just stepped up, took the position, did it, and it worked great. He just stepped naturally into it. So again, I think if people are given the ability, you can see them do it. But again, it was more about him showing the characteristic, and then the rest of the organization recognizing it, saying, "Wow, you should be a leader," rather than somebody saying you are now a leader. And then it's more about, again, the behaviors rather than the title.
Okay. Thanks for those answers. Maybe we have a question about LPM.
First, maybe as an introduction, how would you pitch the LPM to, say, stakeholders, high-level executive?
How would I pitch LPM? Wow, that's a question. So I would focus on what's working and not working in their portfolio. And I would start looking at some of the problems that they're having. And I'm sure that they are having some problems. And I would start by trying to show them how the problems that they're having are coming from lean roots, like they're doing too many things at the same time. They're making commitments too early. They are not communicating strategy in a good enough way. So one of the things that I like doing is asking everybody in the room of leaders to write down the strategy. And then we share it. And it's almost inevitably that nobody even in that leadership room can say the strategy in exactly the same way. And then before that, I talked to some people on the team and I asked them what the strategy is. And I read that back and I show them that nobody knows what the strategy is. So the leadership team can't agree on the strategy. The teams who are executing don't even know what the strategy is. Then you have a problem. And then I use that to actually start the discussions around how can we help things work better. So that's one way that I've done it. Another way is the assessment. I really like the assessment for this because using the assessment, I talk about specific problems that they might have. I might not run the specific example, but really talk about, again, the problems and showcase how the problems are caused by not having participatory budgeting, not budgeting the right thing. So I'll go over the projects that they've had in the past and I'll say, what happened with those projects? Well, that project didn't end on time, didn't end on budget. And then what happened? And we'll go through this and then we'll discuss those problems. Then we'll show them how lean portfolio management can help solve their problem. Because again, it's about solving a problem, not about doing lean portfolio management. So I start with the problem, just going through their specific problems and what's inhibiting them from being more successful.
Okay. Next question would be, well, what are the common key success factors or pitfalls when implementing LPM from your experience?
So I'll start with the pitfalls. Okay. I think the pitfalls are not doing it in a structured way. So for example, we're just picking a random pattern in LPM and we're like, participatory budgeting sounds cool, let's do participatory budgeting. Okay, do we know what the strategy is? No, but we're not going to start there because it's difficult and it's so hard and we're not aligned with strategy. But if we don't know what the strategy is, how are we going to fund it? So you have to, there's a structured pattern to lean portfolio management. You have to start by making sure everybody understands and agrees to what LPM is. And then you have to make sure, do we agree what's the most important thing to do next year? Once we agree to that, we can start working on, well, how do we fund it? So I think a lot of the problems that happen is people just choose a topic that hurts and they're not thinking of it as an implementation. And the reason that in recent things that we released kind of an LPM implementation roadmap specifically for that, was because we noticed people just haphazardly doing things instead of following a very clear process. Now again, the process is not the point. If you know what you're doing and you feel like, for us right now, it matters more to do this, of course do whatever you want, but on the whole, following a structured process to implement LPM makes it easier than just choosing something that you think is going to be really cool.
Okay. About that implementation roadmap for LPM, I've been looking in the SAFE website and I didn't find it, but I did find it in the LPM course. Well, how do you think this is going to evolve in the next versions of SAFe, or what do you think about that roadmap?
So, as we evolved as a company, we have to understand that we've always had, or in the past, we've always had like two types of content. We've had the content that you just go to scale-academy.com and you click an article you read. And then there was the content that was in a course or in a toolkit. So some content is just out there in the framework, and some content is for what we call members. If you go to the SAFe community platform and you go to the practice section, there's a whole practice guide for LPM. It takes you through the LPM implementation guide. It goes deep into every section of it, and we're in the middle of flushing it all out. So I think we have 3 out of the 4 already done, but it takes you step by step by step. We will take a little bit more of that in future versions and put also in the kind of the articles, but it's deep enough that it's not just something that you go and you just read about it in 2 words. It requires more. We have that's why we have a whole practice guide around that. That it will probably be more there than just as an article on SAFe. But I really recommend going there and reading it. It's not a reading; it's kind of it's videos and it's a lot of things, and
I started it, but I didn't go through the whole process. But it's quite interesting, and I've seen that in the course of the different versions of SAFe, the LPM in the SAFe Agilist training, this chapter has evolved the most, kind of in the last version. So, is it something that you are working hard on for the next SAFe versions, or is it mature?
So everything can always be improved, but the thing that we're working right now the most on the next SAFe versions is focusing more on flow, also on the portfolio level, but on all levels of SAFe, and then things around team coaching and around AI and big data. So around flow, you will see more things around portfolio, but other than that, I don't think you're going to see a big change in the portfolio the way it is right now. And I think the reason for that is, it was interesting. When I started teaching SAFe, people would come to an implementing SAFe class, and they would really care about how do you launch a train, and then we would get to the portfolio. Nobody cared about that, because nobody was doing portfolio. Nobody cared about that. And when we asked people at the beginning of class, which part of the thing you care about, nobody cared about the portfolio. But now, when we teach a class, more people care about the portfolio than about launching a train, because they kind of take that as they already know how to do that part. Now they want to understand the portfolio. So as people are doing it more, we're seeing more patterns. And the way SAFe evolved over the years, it's not, let's sit in a room and invent some things and put them up on a website. It's, let's see patterns that are working in the field, and then let's take them and distill them into something that people can actually practice and do. So I think right now the portfolio is still ahead of where most people are implementing it. So we're now at a point where we need more people to catch up, do more things for us to distill more patterns around this. So we're working with a few customers on kind of maybe slightly more advanced patterns, but it will take, I think, a bit for them to even get to where we are right now with SAFe, and then for it to evolve. I wouldn't expect something very major in the next version of SAFe. That's just my.
May I know you have a lot of questions.
No problem. Go ahead.
That's an interesting subject. Everything is interesting, but between starting with the train, starting with portfolio, as you may have said, maybe sometimes we just need to change the portfolio and not launching trains. What I like about LPM is that ability and that way of connecting the enterprise strategy to the whole flow of delivery of value from trains. So usually when we launch train, we always want to keep that part of connecting the whole strategy, even if we don't add LPM.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say it's still, and how would you do it? To which part would you say to keep that connection between enterprise strategy and trains without launching the whole LPM? As you said, it's kind of picking some stuff but not putting everything. How would you do it?
So you can still connect the strategy even without doing LPM almost at all. I mean, product management on a train can still kind of distill a version of strategic themes, just so that people understand what we're trying to do as far as strategy is concerned. Because when you're doing PI planning, the beginning has a business context and a product vision. So at that point, we can kind of present more of the holistic view of what the strategy is without really creating any practices around LPM. So we didn't necessarily create strategic themes. We didn't write them as OKRs maybe. We didn't do budgeting. We don't have guardrails. We don't have any meetings around that. We don't have epics. We don't have any of that. But you can start doing some of those things on the train level so that people actually connect to the strategy. You can do that right from the beginning. But one of the patterns that we've seen lately that is interesting, and it's already made its way into SAFe because we've seen it, is that if in the past it was like, we don't care about LPM, we're just launching a train, and after we launch our train, oh my God, now we're struggling because the funding model doesn't work, let's do LPM. We're now seeing more people come in and say, we already have some level of agility. We want to organize better around value, but honestly, we don't even know what the value is. We're unclear about what our strategy is. So can we start by doing LPM, understanding our strategy, then identifying our value stream, then organizing trains around that? So we're seeing more and more people start with LPM, not really a full-blown LPM process that they run for 2 years, but they are training people on LPM. People start, the LPM fiduciaries start identifying the strategic themes for next year. They're starting to identify what the value streams are. They're starting to think about how to fund them, and then they're launching trains around that. So we're starting to see more and more companies do that than the old pattern of let's ignore the strategy, launch a lot of trains, and then when it becomes a bottleneck, only then we'll go and start worrying about the portfolio. And part of the reason is, in the past, a lot of these was ground up, so somebody, an RTE, would come and say, I want to launch a train. Now we're seeing a lot more of it coming from the top, so people can actually start designing the strategy faster. And so we're seeing more and more implementations start with LPM. And then, of course, immediately go to also trains, because if you're just creating a strategy and you can't execute it, it doesn't help. But really starting there, creating the Kanban, having epics. And so when you're launching the train, they're already aligned around real value streams, around the thought that needed to happen on that on the portfolio level. And a lot of the time it creates better trains, even starting out. So it's an interesting pattern that we're seeing more and more of.
And do you think,
No,
do you
no
think
problem.
it's, we already faced some situation where you have trains, and as you say, they're stuck with that level of project management.
Sure.
And so, do you think it still can work in that way? Because that's the biggest part of that big queue length. Because of project management, you have that low old project stacking projects, and so you have the whole time to market in 2 years, even if you have trains to deliver value. So, do you think this is still something worth to do, or maybe we should better work, as you said, first on that project management and move from project to epics for a start, and then it would be easier, as you say, to launch trains?
So I think both are possible, and it depends on the organization. So if you have enough leadership buy-in to really start thinking through the strategy, really create a better epics, really rethink some of those concepts of how you manage the thing, you're going to help yourself run faster eventually. But even if you ignore that and you just build trains and you start working, you are going to deliver faster. Are you going to deliver as fast as you can? No, as you said, you're going to run into that bottleneck. It's there. But the question is, and I don't know anybody who really does that, I don't know that it's worth it, but in theory, if you did a value stream mapping, we just talked about that early on, would the biggest bottleneck right now be LPM, or would it be still the delivery? Because if it's the delivery, then we can start with the delivery. And I think it really changes. I don't think there's a lot to lose if you have the right buy-in with starting with LPM. It's not a lengthy process. We're not suggesting 2 years of LPM before you launch a train. But delaying the implementation by a month and really forming an LPM function and really thinking through what the strategy is could make the whole process smoother. So if you can do it, I would say it's probably a better pattern, but it doesn't mean that the other pattern doesn't work.
When talking about LPM, it is often referred the whole funding value stream part in budgeting, but I don't know about the other countries. But I know in France this is something quite difficult to change. And my question would be, what would happen if you implement LPM without the whole funding value stream budgeting part?
So imagine that you're still, I have a value stream, I have art, but I'm still funding projects. So what would happen is I would have to constantly fight to keep my arts alive. And I would have to constantly build and rebuild trains. So that means I'm going to lose on two things. One is I'm going to lose on the ability to actually necessarily deliver value faster over time, because people won't learn to work together. Because right now we're a project, and tomorrow we're a project, and the next day we're a project. So we have to keep forming and reforming trains, so they never get to the point where they're like forming, storming, norming, performing. They never get to that performing stage. The other thing that would happen is you would find yourself always in that conundrum of funding project, which means you're always fighting to who was to blame for the problem that we have with the inaccurate funding of this project. So instead of spending your time building, you're spending your time on politics. Can you do it? Yes, of course, but it's inefficient. Now, it's not just in France, it's hard everywhere to change this, because people are used to a certain way of funding things. The interesting thing is, in my opinion, in my experience, is there's more often an assumption that higher leadership, CFOs, would never even be willing to listen to a different model of funding, whereas actually it makes a lot of financial sense to fund in a different way. And when you talk to them about, look, I'm not asking you to fund these value streams forever and hope it's good. I'm actually saying, let's fund this value stream, and we'll come and show you what we're doing with your money. If you don't like what we're doing with your money, take it away. So you actually have more flexibility about how to manage your money. And sometimes sometimes the way you're doing the conversation that really helps. And I found that a lot of time financial people are a lot more open to different kind of funding than the organization assumes. So a lot of time we can't do it here because the CFO will never allow for it. But that's a lot of time not true. Or built on other assumptions like, well, we can't do it because you can't do CapEx and OpEx in Agile. Yes, you can. A lot of people are doing it. So it's built on wrong assumptions, not necessarily how hard it is. Do you have to do it? No. Can you do Agile in development and not do anything in Ops? Yes. Will it be better? Yes. Will it be very efficient? No. Can you do Agile in Dev and Ops and not think about product management and not do design thinking? Yes. Would you build the best product? No. So can you be more Agile than you are right now without funding value streams? Yes. Can you achieve real business agility? Probably not. It's probably possible. And that's okay. That doesn't mean right now maybe it's good enough for where you can be as an organization.
I've seen a bit of experience on the SAFE website that the participatory budgeting, which is a part of the whole budgeting part, has helped a lot in making people more involved in the whole LPM approach. I don't remember the exact company, but is it something that you encounter from time to time, quite often, or?
Yeah. So again, the goal is to budget value streams. You don't have to use participatory budgeting as a technique, but I found it very helpful. I find it helpful for a lot of things, by the way. It's built on a game that Luke Holman created called Built by a Feature. So I use it for a lot of things. Let's say I have 3 stakeholders and they're fighting for what we should build in the next PI. I will sometimes bring them into a room, give them fake monopoly money, and ask them to buy features. And it really helps allocate because nobody has enough money to buy everything they want, so they have to collaborate. I've used it for hiring. We have a few recs that we can hire into. I give people money and they have to put their money on the recs, and nobody can fund everything by themselves, so they have to talk. The same thing we've noticed with participatory budgeting. People are very much in their own domain. I want to fund my thing, you want to fund your thing, you want to fund your thing. But if we come to a room together, we have to fund a value stream. And you have money, and you have money, and I have money. But honestly, none of us can even fund our stuff with our money. We have to come together. Now we have to talk about what's the most important right now for us as a company. And it's not an easy conversation, but it's a very important conversation, because we have to understand, and again, it comes a lot of the time from the fact that we don't actually agree on what the strategy is. So I think the strategy is A, strategy B, strategy C, and we each push for our own projects enough that we're kind of happy. But if we actually had the time to speak, we would realize that my strategy, well, I think it's really important, is actually a lot less important than his strategy, which is right now the most important thing for this company. So we should put all of the money on the things he wants to build, and that's it. And I'm not going to get anything this year, but it's the right thing for the company. So I found a lot of places that when you bring people together to do participatory budgeting and really play it as a game, you start having the right conversations around it that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's really interesting, especially if you do it in a number of groups, and then you look across 5 groups that ran it, and you ask, what did nobody fund? And there's always something that nobody funded. And that already takes something off the table. And for companies that are trying to do 100 initiatives at the same time, just taking 20 initiatives off the table right now can already make things easier, even if we're still doing too much. So there's something that nobody funds. And then there's something that everybody funded. Everybody fully funded. So now we can have some agreement that these are the most important things. And then there's something that people partially funded. And then we can start having a conversation, can we just do part of it? Can we just choose a part of it that's the most important part? So it really creates the right conversations. And I use that a lot, internally, externally, with customers that are moving to SAFe, and with customers where I'm working with them on product management work. I use those techniques a lot. They're very, very helpful.
I always have questions. You talked just before about the importance of metrics. Knowing your business. I guess, for example, if you have such kind of discussion about financing, funding a value stream, without the data, it would be more difficult talks.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it might be the reality, by the way.
Sorry?
But it might be the reality. You might not have the data.
Yeah.
So you might still have to have the conversation without the data.
That was another question I wanted to ask, but I will ask this one. So would you say, in order to set up all those important data and knowing what to optimize, where to optimize, and what to do in your company, what to transform, do you think it's a requirement to have a PMO team or people helping with that, or is that thing completely possible just relying on the people in the train and the portfolio management?
So I think it depends on the type of value streams that you have. If you have very big, complicated value streams that require multiple arts or even multiple solution trains, really, really complex things, you probably have to rely on something like an APMO to help you do some of those things. On the other hand, if you have simpler value streams that, let's say, all fit in specific trains, a lot of that can be done by the train itself, product management, the release train engineer. So you don't have to have an APMO to help with some of those metrics. And in most cases, it's kind of a combination. So usually most companies that I've worked with, there are some things that can be done by the train and should be done by the train, should be decentralized, so that the train owns the business results, as opposed to, well, the train, we own delivering features, and then somebody else owns whether we're actually successful. No, the train owns the business results. But then there are some metrics that not a single train can own, and you have to own it as a portfolio and stuff like that. So the more you can kind of get down to the train level, I think you'll create better ownership. You will get a different software if my goal is to, and what I'm measured on as a product manager of the train, it's increase the market in the Chinese market and whether my goal is to deliver more features. I'll deliver more features, or even I need to handle translating all of our systems to Chinese. I'll translate all of our systems to Chinese. Did that actually achieve more of the market? I don't care. I don't own that. But maybe we don't need to translate everything. We need to translate just one thing, or we need to focus on a completely different thing, and that's going to win the market. If I own the actual KPI, I'll care about it. If you own the KPI and I own a specific part of it that's just, you've given me a task, translate the system, I'll do it. I don't care about the actual results. So I think some of them need to lie in different levels, but the more you can have the people on the train and the team's own business results, the better you will achieve.
So you don't need some kind of homogenization. You can have the same kind of KPIs between the different trains. Or
again, it depends on what you're building. Yeah. So if you're all serving one operational value streams, yes. Yeah. If you're not, maybe not. So again, it really depends on the structure of the company and what it's building and how many people it needs to build it. Again, the more you have more complex value streams that require more people and more trains and more development value streams to develop, the more you need somebody up there to kind of help coordinate those KPIs. But again, the fact that there's an APMO that helps coordinate them doesn't mean that now the APMO owns them and is the only one accountable for are we meeting them. Cascade them down, make sure that other people feel ownership for solving the business problem, and that's going to make you a lot more successful.
Well, after that, oftentimes a company that launched trains still have a lot of teams that are working on waterfall.
Yep.
But they still want to implement LPM. Why not?
Why not?
How complicated or simple is it to just manage both in the same portfolio?
In a lot of places, it's just a reality. So you can implement all the trains and then only start LPM once you're done with everything else. But most companies, even if they're starting in that direction, they're launching some trains, they're getting to a point where the portfolio is starting to be a problem, then they're starting to implement LPM. But some of the value streams are still working in waterfall. Or, by the way, they don't have to be working in waterfall. They can working in uncoordinated agility or some type of agility. It's not all necessarily waterfall. And it's okay. It just means that you have to understand that you have to account for it. Because as you have dependencies, there's something that I might want to define shorter term, but actually I have to define longer term, because that value stream is now working on the requirements for something that they're going to develop in 9 months. So if I can't say that I actually want it, I will only know it at the last possible moment, then they won't be able to work on it. So I have to start working on something earlier than I would want, which means probably my WIP is higher than I would want. That's okay. I just manage to it. I understand that I'm working with different people, and the nice thing about that actually is that it will help me prioritize. So as I'm working, let's say I have one train, just for the sake of argument, one train that's working in Agile, everybody else is in waterfall, and I'm running an LPM. Now I can sit and say, where am I having the most problem delivering value? Let's say it's with that part of the value stream. Then that's the next train I should launch. It actually helps me sometimes prioritize what is the next thing to work on, because I can identify the value stream. But it's just a reality. You always start with some parts that are working more waterfall or than others, and it's okay. You can definitely do a portfolio that includes multiple value streams. Some of them are still not agile. By the way, sometimes some of them are not even in your company. You can have a value stream where a whole part of it is being built by a third-party supplier. How are they working? I don't even know. Okay, that's just the reality of it. You have to plan around it. But as we're working with it, we're starting to see, we're doing our value stream mapping, and we're seeing that our biggest bottleneck is there. Then that's where you need to now launch the next train, or work with a supplier to help them move to Agile. Because right now, that's the biggest bottleneck for you to work. And so it's the way that the Toyota works with their suppliers to change the suppliers' processes is, I think, it's an amazing case study to understand what they're benefiting from this. It's just fabulous.
I think with that,
ran out
the
of
end,
time.
Oh.
maybe I may ask one question to conclude.
Yes,
Workshop?
you can.
The goal is to
just the question in the post time, but you can.
just to conclude, what would you say to someone to make them understand that she should be a lean agile leader? Conclude with the leadership. Why they should be a lean agile leader?
Again, I don't think the point is being a lean agile leader. Again, I think the point is achieving the results. So I think I would try to mirror the problems. So I would ask them questions around that would surface the problems that they're probably having with their current leadership style. Do you have time to take a vacation? If you're not there, are things happening? If you're, who else can do what you're doing? If you had to leave tomorrow, would somebody be able to take over? So I would ask questions about the problems and then use lean agile leadership as the results. It's not about why do I want to be a lean agile leader. Honestly, I don't want to. I want to have a better successful product. I want to have more successful company. I want to have employees that are engaged and loving to work for me. I just got a WhatsApp this morning from one of the people that report to me that said, I really like working for you. That's what I want. If I can show that what I'm doing right now, I could get more of those by being a lean agile leader, I'll become a lean agile leader. But I don't want to be a lean agile leader. I want to have happy people reporting to me that are really successful. That's what I care about. Anything else is just, again, it's a technique to get to it.
Maybe that's lean agile leadership too.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Inbar.